when you guys try to add or subtract just regular fractions, you guys know that you have to have a common denominator. You can't add 1/5 plus 2/3 unless you make them part of the same family per se. So you can't add fifths with thirds. They both have to be fifths or they both have to be thirds. So the same thing goes with these rational expressions that we've been looking at. They still have to have common denominators for you to be able to add or subtract or combine their numerators. So if your fraction has a like denominator, all you guys have to do is combine the tops and keep the bottom. So if you had a over c plus b over c, it'd become a plus b over c. You keep that denominator of c. If you guys had 3x over 5x squared plus 7 over 5x squared, it'd just become 3x plus 7 over 5x squared. If you had 9x cubed over x plus 1 minus x squared over x plus 1, they just stay the same on the bottom. They're both part of the same family. You just keep the numerators, or keep the denominators and add the numerators. So 9x cubed minus x squared would become your top. So it's really easy if the denominators are the same. That's not usually the case though. So when you guys have unlike denominators, you guys have to find the lowest common denominator between the two denominators that you have, and then use that to be able to rewrite your fractions. So if you guys look at a over c plus b over d, the lowest common denominator is going to include both of those, c and d. So when you're trying to add them, if you just have a over just c, to be able to combine that, it's missing the d part of the denominator. So you have to multiply the top and bottom by that. That's how you get AD over CD. And B over D has the D part. It's missing the C part of that common denominator. So multiply top and bottom by C. So you end up with a common denominator of CD and just combine the top, AD plus BC. And then we can write it from two fractions into one. But you have to find that lowest common denominator first. If you guys are trying to find the least common multiple of two expressions or three expressions, the first thing I'm going to remind you to do is just fully factor everything that you can. Now in this case, it's factored for you guys. But if it's not, that's the first thing you want to do. So in this case, if you're trying to find the least common multiple of 3x times x plus 3, the three things being multiplied together in your first expression here are 3, x, and x plus 3. For your second expression, technically you can factor 6. 6 would be 2 and 3, and then that x minus 3. So if you're looking at this, the least common denominator or least common multiple is going to be the most or the highest number of times a value occurs in an expression. So what that means to you guys is that I see 2 3s here, one in each expression. I don't want to include 2 3s. I just want the most that one of the expressions has. So the most that one of the expressions has is 3. I also see a 2, an x plus 3, and an x minus 3. So when we're doing this, the lowest common multiple, it seems weird, but it would be 3 times 2, which is 6, so 6 times x, x plus 3, and x minus 3. That is your lowest common multiple here. And you guys know you don't have to factor that 6 down. You guys should know that the least common multiple between 3 and 6 is 6. But it does work that way that you can factor everything completely and find it that way. So we'll eventually use these to actually start adding and subtracting, but for right now we're just working on finding that lowest common multiple or lowest common denominator. So let's go ahead and look at another one. So if we're trying to find the lowest common multiple between these two expressions, again, fully factor everything. So if I fully factor 5x squared minus 45, I'm going to pull a 5 out first and make this x squared minus 9. And then I see that x squared minus 9 is a difference of squares, so I can factor that even further to x plus 3 and x minus 3. Then I want to factor 4x squared plus 24x plus 36. I'm going to pull out a 4 first. I'm going to make that, and that will become x squared plus 6x plus 9. And that is a perfect square binomial or trinomial. So this will become x plus 3 times x plus 3. Now you can look at this and say, okay, what's the greatest common multiple or the least common multiple between 4 and 5? The lowest number that they both go into is going to be 20. But if you break 4 down, you can say, okay, well that would be 2 times 2. And then just make sure, I don't know why I have an x squared there. And then we have our x plus 3 and our x plus 3. So these are your two expressions fully factored. So you guys want to keep in mind the least common multiple is the lowest value or the lowest multiple that you can get away with that they both go into. So it sounds backwards, but what's going to happen is you're going to want to take the highest number of times a factor occurs in one of your expressions. So if you're trying to find the lowest common multiple, guys, when I'm looking at these two factored expressions, I see 3 x plus 3's, but the lowest common multiple is not going to contain 3 of them. The lowest common multiple is only going to contain 2 because that's the most that one of the expressions has. So we need both of those x plus 3's. You can write it as x plus 3 squared. If you want to. So that takes care of that. And then we also need an x minus 3. And then if you're looking at the numbers, we need 2 2's and a 5. Well, 2 2's is 4 times 5 is 20. So whether you fully factor it and see what you need to pull from there, or just know that the lowest common multiple of 5 and 4 is 20, either way will work. So your lowest common multiple for these two expressions would be x plus 3 squared times x minus 3 times 20. That's the lowest common multiple of those two expressions. Usually they will be smaller than this when we actually start to work with them and operate with them. So let's go ahead and try one of those now. So the best steps I can give you guys for when you're doing this is just, again, fully factor those denominators first to see what they include so that you can then second find the lowest common denominator to 3, write that as your new denominator, and then when you're actually going to combine them, multiply each numerator by the part of the denominator that fraction is missing so that you can combine them. But really the best thing I can do is just to say, make sure you're practicing them if you're not quite fully understanding it. And make sure you guys ask if you need help.